So the first order of business on Collider Ladies Night is we play a game called Dicey Questions.
Yes.
Usually that involves a dice tower. The dice tower did not travel to New York, so you will pick your own numbers. So what is your first number that you'd like to pick?
5.
We are getting a Midnight Club one right out the gate here. So this one we're calling Midnight Club Mug. Let's say you are in the Midnight Club yourself. What does your mug look like and what is inside of it?
My mug has a very delicious cup of chamomile tea and very soothing, very, not too much caffeine. I don't want to have the jitters. And on the kind of mug it's kind of like a homemade stoneware that I probably got at an arts and crafts festival in Northern California.
Your next number now.
6.
Would you rather have to fake sneeze in a scene or fake vomit in a scene?
Well, my own personal sneeze is so loud and out of control that I would never want to repeat that on camera if I could avoid it. So I could probably muster up a really cute little sneeze. I would rather do that than vomit.
Okay.
I've worked with a lot of vomit and it's never fun.
You have one more number. What is your final?
Oh, it's gonna be 8.
There is a zombie outbreak on the set of the Midnight Club. You can pick 2 co-stars to team up with. Who do you pick that gives yourself the best chance of surviving?
Holy cow. There are so many badasses in this show, first of all. But I would definitely pick Ruth Codd because she could, kick the bejesus out of one of these zombies. And she would also really just, have some choice words for the zombies that would probably scare them away anyway. And then the other person I would take with me, I think I would probably take Iman because she's very dependable. And she's very calm. And so, when you're facing the zombies, you need someone who can keep their head on their shoulders and not freak out.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back for a brand new episode of Collider Ladies Night. My guest needs no introduction, but I have to give one because Heather Langenkamp is here to talk about a whole bunch of your accomplishments, but we are here specifically celebrating the Midnight Club, which is exceptional.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Really
Thanks so
no
much.
Surprise with Mike Flanagan at the helm, but every single time I'm like, how do you keep delivering shows this good at such a fast rate? I know that early on you did a little background work to kind of get into the industry, and I'm curious if there were any expectations that those 2 productions set for you in terms of what it might be like for you to lead a film, and then how did your first film experiences compare to the expectations those sets set?
Ooh. Wow. Well, yeah, my very first job was on The Outsiders. And then my first line in a film was Rumblefish, both in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the summer. And so I got to see how like a pretty big Hollywood production was being made and big trailers and fancy hotels. And the kids were, ushered around here and there. And it seemed to me to be pretty fancy, A-list production. And probably with the exception of the Midnight Club, most of the productions that I have worked on, aside from like big television, sitcom, but they've been pretty modest. And even Nightmare on Elm Streets were always, they were modest productions. And we didn't get a lot of fancy little, extras. I was really excited when I did Nightmare 7 that they gave me like a basket of fruit on the first day. I thought that was really nice.
That's the least you should get. Let's get into the first Nightmare on Elm Street. With that, I'm very curious, what was the very first piece of material you saw? Was it a description of the film? Was it sides? Where did all that start?
No, it was the sides of the scene where it's Tina and Glenn and I at the, slumber party, and he's, lying to his aunt and uncle that he's out with his friends, but he's really with us. And so that scene was the scene we read first. And so I just thought this was like a John Hughes fun movie about teenagers, didn't really get the sense that it was going to be a horror movie until, so they sent me the script much later. And I'm like, what is this? Like, people on the ceiling, oh my gosh, getting blood coming out of a bed. I didn't really know what to expect. And my imagination was so limited at that time for horror. I had no idea like what I was in for. I had more of like a Wizard of Oz mentality about what horror was going to look like.
Must be night and day now. So you had committed to Nightmare on Elm Street before having a full understanding of what that movie was going to be.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So when you got the full rundown, were you at all nervous about staying committed and seeing it through? Or did you have enough faith, given the work that Wes had already put out, that like he's got this and this is going to work?
Well, because no one really knew what Wes Craven was capable of. So, I mean, it could have gone the other way just as easily. Could have been just a footnote in Hollywood history that a very inexpensive horror movie was made and no one ever heard about it again. I mean, that was definitely a possibility. Nobody had heard about Wes Craven really. And I remember people weren't that excited about me doing a horror movie. They thought that that would be very stigmatizing and that people wouldn't get to see me like in the John Hughes, like happy teenager movies that were also being made at that time. So I was really desperate to stay in Hollywood. I knew that if I could just make, that wages for that movie, that 5-week movie, that I could stay probably another couple of months without having to go back home or, I knew it would prevent me from having to have a, waitress job for a few months if I could I kind of just was going to take the money and just do it.
I am always curious to hear about that type of experience because I know this is an industry that has a habit of boxing people into their first great success. Is that something that you experienced after that first movie came out, or were those doors to other genres still open if you wanted them open at all?
I felt a little bit of the boxing in stigma. I did feel it, though I don't at the time it's just so exciting to be able to go out on auditions and you aren't really analyzing like, oh, I didn't get that part, why, it must have been that. But for a while I did get asked to do a lot more kind of horror movie kinds of things, and I never wanted to take another role in horror. I mean, it was always like, I did my great role, I don't want to do another horror movie. And so I think that was my mentality.
I have to ask more about working with Wes because I've only heard the absolute best things about his sets from people who have been on the show and worked on his films. So, what is something unique to a Wes Craven set that you really appreciated and wish you would see on more sets out there?
The laughter, the jokes, the practical joking, just like all up until the moment that we were rolling camera, just everyone had such a relaxed and everyone felt really happy to be on his sets. And my husband's worked with him too on different films than I have, and we both agree like he's one of the funniest men that we have ever known. And we miss him so much because he just was so brilliant at making people feel one that they were working really hard and doing a good job, which I think as a director is one of the nicest things you can do for people is actually compliment people on their work, which you think would happen all the time, but it really doesn't. And he was very generous that way. He made, he took people aside and said, thank you, you're doing a great job.
I love that. What about his approach to working with you as an actor's director on all the films you collaborated on? Was there ever a moment where, I don't know, you were having a tough time accessing something in a scene and he gave you a note or something you needed, and then all of a sudden it changed your own perspective and way of tackling something?
I'm a very literal person, so if things don't make sense to me, that I would always want an explanation like, okay, tell me why Nancy is doing this thing. Like, and then he would just look at me and said, Heather, it's a nightmare. Anything goes. And so he would never let me like over reason, be overly logical. He's like, this is a dream. Just, have fun with it. And, that you don't always have to come with all this backstory and all prepared because it's a dream, it's like can be wild, it can be unusual, and you could have different ways of playing it that would all work.
I feel like that should have been a tagline for one of the movies. Something very appropriate. I have to touch on New Nightmare because it is one of my absolute favorites in the franchise, and your performance is like truly exceptional. It's exceptional in all of them, but that one is the favorite for me. It is a very unusual experience to get to play yourself in a movie. Yes, so is there anything you learned about your own craft by doing that surprised you, or maybe anything about, the Nightmare franchise and its legacy that took you by surprise by playing yourself in that capacity?
I think my willingness to play Heather Langenkamp is more of a reflection of how much I cared about Wes than it was about my desire to do that. He had to kind of really convince me that it was going to be okay. And so what it made me do is like I trusted him that it wasn't going to be terrible, because my biggest fear was that nobody would buy the premise and that it would be a laughing stock of Hollywood or something, and then here would be my name attached to it. Like that's my selfish fear. And and so he worked on me for, a couple of days, like in the very early moments of showing me the script, because I didn't have the imagination again. Like I was deficient in understanding like that it would be a good movie. And once we got onto the set, whenever I had trouble, like at one point, I didn't want to say that my mother had been in a mental institution. Heather Langenkamp doesn't want to say that my mom was in a mental institution. And so he and I argued about that point because he really wanted me to say it. And I didn't say it. I just like put my foot down. I'm like, I'll do anything for you, but I won't do that.
One of the first things that I read in the production notes with this particular character is that Mike flat out said he was looking for a horror icon to fill this role. And I don't know if it was me reading that gave me Nancy vibes when I watched your performance. Was that on your mind at all? Did you want to imbue Dr. Stanton with any Nancy qualities?
I mean, Nancy has so many great qualities. And we've seen her, we saw her kind of grow up and become a woman too. And she was like a therapist in Nightmare 3, of course, and doing group therapy sessions. So, of course, people are going to draw a lot of comparisons to that. Um, in the end, I think you sometimes do your best work when you use parts of yourself in the role. And I love kids so much, and young people especially. I feel like we need to do as much as we can to kind of, be their mentors and help them get through life, which is so trying. And I just felt that that part of me was really so similar to Dr. Stanton. And so it kind of fit like a glove, the part. I'd never felt like I had to do a lot of like extra research, like how do I be this doctor, this woman who's taken responsibility for all of these sick children. I mean, I don't think personally I could do what she does, but I definitely can. I have a glimpse of what kind of person I wanted her to be.
I need to highlight this incredible ensemble you get to
Yes.
work with. And I guess the way to get at it here might be so like you started out really young, had a whole bunch of great success early on. Is there anything you saw one of the cast members of Midnight Club do that you wish you could like pocket and then tell your younger self, like, try that? That's a really cool technique.
Well, I think, gosh, that's a really great question. Each kid has their own thing, actually.
I'll hear about as many of them as you
I
want to
think,
share.
Iman is a very calm and can concentrate very hard on what she's doing. And I really admire the way she is able to be the lead in a show. And it made me realize, like, my job at Nancy, I worked for 5 weeks and we made an entire movie. Like she had to work for so many months maintaining that character and never getting tired or bored or, like, are we done yet? Like none of that. It was so every day, even the last day, she was just so ready to be that really intense person. And it was an intense role. And so I could really feel for her. Anara is she has this ethereal, like incredible, soft beauty that is so appealing. And a lot of times, I wish I had had more of that as Nancy, because a lot of people say that Nancy was kind of more of an asexual teenager, like the parts of her her sexuality are not really on display in Nightmare 1. And I kind of agree with that. And yet I didn't really have that thing. And I don't know why, but I don't feel like I brought that to the screen. But I see, like in Inara, I see something that I would have loved to have had a handle on. And I mean, Chris is so much fun. Like while we're like, I'm sitting there studying my lines, he's literally like totally able to forget that he's on a set, and he doesn't seem to let it get, make him crazy or anything. He just has such a natural sense of fun, and always making everybody laugh around him. I think that I would pocket that away. I think Igby I would pocket, has intensity and he really wants to be I mean, like the best actor in the universe. I get the sense like he is so driven to like put on his very, very best every day. And all of these qualities are things that, I might have had, but I really see it in them.
Thank you so much for visiting us
Oh,
today,
it's
for
so
being on
wonderful,
Collider
Karen.
Ladies Night. It
Thank
was
you
such a
so
pleasure to
much.
meet you, and I'm excited to talk
Well,
more
thank you
later.
for all the nice things you said about the show.
Of course, I
Thank
mean
you.
it so much.
All right.